Hear Her Sports is a podcast featuring incredible female athletes, Olympians, and women in sports as they tell their stories about training, what motivates them, and how competing affects everything else they do. Hosted by Elizabeth Emery, a former professional cyclist, we learn in this episode of Evergreen Spotlight from some of the top competitors in women's sports about their struggles, their successes, and everything in between. In Elizabeth's words, we hope you find a few gems to take into your own training and in your own life, in and off the field. Let's hear from Elizabeth, host of Hear Her Sports. Elizabeth, as a cyclist turned podcaster, some of your racing career highlights include being the U.S. national time trial champion, taking the gold in the Pan American Games, and you have also finished the Women's Tour de France 3 times. What was it like to win the gold?
That was such an incredible experience and is a highlight because, not so much because I won it, but because of all the work that I put into it. And that is one thing that I learned as a professional cyclist and continue to learn as an athlete is just how much work it takes. And, that can take different forms. And that's one thing I like about doing Hear Her Sports is all of the athletes I speak to work incredibly hard and they talk about how that looks like in their life. And it looks different in everybody's life.
I love learning that and listening to that too when in your interviews. Why cycling for you? What is it that you find most fulfilling?
It's really interesting that you ask that question because so many of my guests have gone through a ton of different sports as kid, and then they try the one sport they end up with, and it's immediate love. And that is exactly what happened to me when I started bike riding and bike racing more professionally and more seriously. I just loved it. I had always ridden as a kid, but never took it as seriously as I did in my 20s when I did start racing. And just the freedom. I was living in New York City at the time, so being able to escape the city was super, super important. And cycling is empowering. Sports is empowering. So all of that.
Do you listen to music or anything while you're cycling?
No. I like to, hear the birds, hear the wheels moving, hear the other cyclists.
And speaking about how you dig in with your guests about how their sport affects them and their lives and how they're positively affected, and not just in competition, but also outside of it, how has cycling positively affected your life?
I learned so much cycling. I mean, one of the things I learned was exactly what I said, which is just how to work hard, how to tackle something you want to become better at, and how to make that happen, sort of the little steps. And the other thing I learned was you don't have to start something thinking that you're going to be an Olympian or, whatever level. You don't have to imagine that. Starting small, you never know where that's going to lead. And I did do one episode with Shelma Junn, who started Flash Foxy, and she talks about exactly that, how, Flash Foxy originally was just an Instagram feed, and she wanted to talk to her friends, and it just absolutely blew up, and she had no idea where that was going to go. And so that was something that I really learned cycling.
Flash Foxy, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, Flash Foxy is great. It's just a community for women climbers, rock climbers. And like a lot of sports, climbing is full of sexism. So she started this group for her friends mostly. And there was so much need for a community like that. And it really blew up. And, she started, as I said, very small, but she started hosting weekend workshops that filled up in literally minutes. And she started a film studio where she makes films about women climbers. So this little thing that she started just totally expanded. And I just love that story.
I feel that success leaves clues. And so there's a lot of clues there of like starting a community, doing those workshops, like putting things out there, like just for a specific crowd. So I like that. Thank you. You're originally from Cleveland and you live in Cleveland now. And so I have to ask, like, how do you stay inspired to cycle when it's like freezing weather? I would have like no motivation whatsoever. I need your advice.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to help you because I recently started playing squash. And one of the reasons I love squash is it is indoors.
Okay.
And so during the crappy Cleveland winters, I can escape indoors and still have a sport.
It's tough.
I'm sorry.
No, that was really useless. I'm just kidding. How do you think one gets over like a general plateau in their exercise and like workout routine? Like how do you push through, that negative self-talk and get to the end of your trail or your exercise routine?
One of the things that I understood right away when I started Hear Her Sports was that I was a genius. I created my own community by being able to speak to all these athletes. And for me, that has been my inspiration. And, we talked about COVID a little bit earlier so during COVID, it was a bummer. And having these women that I was speaking to and also remembering all the previous episodes just really motivated me, really inspired me. And I think for female athletes, often we don't have our community of like-minded people who live next door or who live in our city or whatever. I mean, there's certainly a lot of them. I don't want to say that that's not true. I have a lot of friends here in Cleveland who are very athletic, but having a podcast, having the opportunity to listen to other podcasts opens a whole new world. And I can talk to Olympians and world champions and, people who live next door to somebody. And it's just, to me, that is what keeps me going. I also have to say that thinking about long-term health keeps me going. And, okay, I don't want to go out today. It's raining out. I don't want to go out today. But through the podcast, I have discovered how important physical movement is for everybody. And one of the terms that I've discovered can be problematic for a lot of people is athlete. Like a lot of women don't want to say that they're an athlete, or they don't want to play sports. But being physically active is important for every single person. And if we want to have a really good life, long, good life, we have to move. And that doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to want to go to the Olympics, but walk down the street, garden, whatever it is, our bodies are made to move. And if we stop, then they're not going to be really happy.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful advice. And that's something that I try to do my best at, is just moving daily, because it's also a mind and body thing. If you don't move around, it's almost like your mind becomes stagnant too, which is not good. Yeah,
absolutely. There's so much connection between the mind and body. And when I stop moving because I'm injured or whatever it is, or I'm super busy, I suffer mentally. And it's hard because, you suffer mentally and then all of a sudden, you want to go out even less. And so I personally have to be intellectual about it. Like, I have to go out today.
Definitely. Speaking about Hear Her Sports, I am so curious of the stories that you've heard in talking with these incredible female athletes and the stories that you personally resonate with. Can you maybe share with us some things that are similar as a thread for you in your interviews?
Since we've been talking a lot about how much work it can be, a pretty recent interview was with a Canadian Olympic sailor, Sarah Douglas, and she talks about all the spreadsheets she keeps. And I was just blown away. So she has spreadsheets about the weather, about the sunshine, about the current of the ocean, about the temperature of the water, about the wind direction and the wind speed, in addition to spreadsheets about all her own training and exercise and what's been successful. And, in her sport, starts are super important. So she keeps track of her starts in spreadsheets. And it was a really great reminder of, what all you can put into your sport. And one of the things I try to talk about or like to get across is that all of these lessons that we learn in sports do translate into life outside of sports. So Sarah Douglas is keeping all these spreadsheets about her passion about making the Paris Olympic team and medaling there. But it can be for a CEO. That information can be for a CEO, or it can be for, you want to be an actor or an artist or whatever it is. But that incredible detail really resonated with me. So that was certainly one story.
I love that. And it makes me feel like my love for spreadsheets is not crazy. Like I'm not. Was there any other example? That was a stellar example.
It's so interesting. People always ask me what my favorite episodes are. It's always so hard because they're all just, I hate, it's just terrible to say that all of the episodes are great, but I do love all of the women. And I think that's what's exciting for me about this podcast is that sports can take so many different shapes and sizes. And I mean that very literally and also metaphorically. And so there are episodes that would resonate with, I think, pretty much anybody because there's so many different sports and there's so many different stories. One of the things that I have liked in several episodes is there's one particular, Sam Moore, and she started researching about women training based on their cycles, their menstrual cycles. And that totally blew my mind. And I love the episodes that completely blown my mind. It just shifted every way I think. This idea that we've all been taught how to strength train, for example, based on research that is being done by men, for men. And so here she's saying, okay, women maybe shouldn't be doing it in the same way. And it had never occurred to me that was sort of the system that we've developed.
Right.
So that was fascinating.
That is fascinating. And it's such a cool job too, to interview people and to just get all this information and to have your mind blown and to have information and advice given to you. It's very cool. What is your advice today for women in sports and a up and coming young girl who wants to be in the Olympics or to train? And I may have wanted to be a figure skater. You never know. So would love to know what your advice would be to someone who actually has a chance at doing that.
It's good. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it takes work but it also takes passion, being excited about it. And going back to my cycling career, I certainly never had intended to go to the national championships. That was just completely not on my radar. I started cycling in New York City thinking it would be a fun activity. I really liked it. The community was incredible. And that's what kept me going and super excited. And I'm now playing squash. And what is exciting to me about squash, I certainly love the game, but I also really love the community. So I think finding a good community is super important. I really think that, and I think that based on reflection. I don't know if while I was cycling, I would have said that the community is as important as it was, but my experience of finding squash showed me it was exactly the same thing that had happened with cycling. And the common thread for that was the community and really enjoying the people and being energized by them and just, discovering how to learn something new and get better at whatever it was.
I don't know what squash is, but I know that I'm hungry now that you're saying that.
It's a really fun game.
Is it? It's fun? Yes. I'm not familiar.
It is. It's fun. It's a ball sport in a small space.
A lot different than cycling. There's a much more
completely different
in there for you probably, right?
Well, you know what it is it's 1-to-1 battle. You're in a small space with one other person and you have to figure it out. How are you going to win the point?
I've wondered about life after sports for athletes. To me, it seems like there's an expiration date. Could you maybe explain the mindset of someone that goes into competing on a professional level and having to deal with life after competing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It is hard. And the transition is inevitable. And I think a lot of athletes who leave their sport find trouble continuing in that sport at a lower level because they've experienced it at such a high level. And so they often switch sports or spend time wondering, how are they going to retain their identity? Because athletes are always athletes and they are going to, most athletes will continue doing something for the rest of their lives. And that is what I find super interesting, is how to maintain that level of activity and finding a sport that will keep you energized and interested.
Let's turn a little bit of a corner and talk about the art of podcasting, just because you have close to 200 episodes, which is amazing, and congratulations on that. And we would just love to know, like, what your favorite parts about podcasting are, what your least favorite parts, like, where do you struggle, where do you think you thrive?
I love talking to the athletes, the women that I speak to every other week. It just feels so great to be able to call or connect with people I admire or want to know more about. To me, that has been the greatest gift and has, as I said, given me community. And I really enjoy figuring out how to find out their story and ask good questions. And because I've been an athlete in the past, I think I can relate to them. And I've been told by my guests that I ask good questions. And I really love hearing that. I value it. And so I always want to get better and be more considerate about their own stories and what they want to share. And what I don't like about it, I don't know if there's anything I don't like about it. I wish I had I wish it was easier to share the stories and, have people find podcasts. I think the search engines still aren't doing as good a job as they could for that. So I guess maybe that.
Elizabeth, in finding those good questions to ask your guests, what are the bones of a good question, do you think?
For me, the bones are really good research. Lots of good research. And it's sort of funny because one of the reasons I started this podcast is that there's only 4% of sports media coverage is about women. And so doing research can often be hard, but I do as much research as I can about the athlete. And if I don't know the sport, I do a ton of research about the sport. And social media really helps because I get to see what's important to them. I have also developed a list of questions for the athletes when they sign up for a time to record. And those questions reveal also what is important to them. So I know sort of a little bit about their personality. And I do a lot of thinking in general about what do listeners want to hear from the athletes? Like, what do female fans of sport want to know about their female heroes? And so I guide it like that. And I try to keep the questions open enough so that the guest can lead the way.
I love that answer. We will be stealing all of those tactics. That's awesome. Seriously, that was a good answer. I love that.
Thanks.
Elizabeth, are there any other aspects of either podcasting or in your interviews or your past as an amazing cyclist? Is there anything that you'd want us to kind of take away from this interview?
Yes, I think the message that I have trouble expressing well and convincing people about, because my guests are all really high level, Olympians, world champions, national champions, they compete at a world level. I mean, even the sort of quote normal people are doing incredible things. And so it seems like it's not for everybody. There's a disconnect. I cannot be that person. So I want everyone to know, to listeners to know, that they can be an athlete, that, you are an athlete if you do the activity. You don't have to be incredible at it. And I think that's so important. I really want I want everyone to know how important activity is. And that, as you said, it impacts your mental health. It impacts your long-term health. And it also can bring community, great joy. I just think there's so much about it. And one of the stats that I love, which I haven't mentioned yet, is that it's something like 95% of C-suite women played sports. That's a huge percentage.
Yeah, it is. Wow.
Yeah. And it's because of what they learn while they're doing sports. And those lessons translate into regular life.
It's an actual, almost a necessity, for success. It leaves that clue a little bit.
Yeah. And I think particularly for women, and I'm learning this in squash because it is one-on-one, mano-a-mano competition, how do you compete? How do you be aggressive in a way that resonates with yourself? Because it can look in different ways. And a lot of my guests and I talk about that. Like, what does aggression look like? How does it manifest itself? How does it work for you? And the truth is, if you're a C-suite woman, you are aggressive in some sort of way because you're leading everybody.
Yeah. Nice girls don't get the corner office, right?
Right.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for all that you are doing for women athletes and women everywhere by having your inspiring conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
Good. And we just want to encourage you to keep going, to shine a light on women in athletics and to keep going.
Thank you. Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and got a gem or two to motivate your training and to fuel your life. For more information about Hear Her Sports, check out evergreenpodcast.com, where you'll find the full list of thought-provoking and always growing podcasts. Until next time, I'm Julie Holliday.